Raquel, at the beginning of this ELT chat, Google Cardboard was mentioned by one of the chatters. Could you tell us a little bit about a Google Cardboard and what it's used for?
Sure. Well, the Google Cardboard is actually this made of cardboard material with lenses. And this was devised so that the VR experience could be cheaper and therefore used in education. Just to explain the principle, what we do is we have a mobile phone and then we fit it here. And then via a YouTube video recorded in 360 degrees or maybe a cardboard app, the student or anyone can have an immersive VR experience.
Later on in the chat, the topic about how these things like Google Cardboards and these headsets could be used in the English language classroom. And one of the participants called Sergio Luca talked about how he would, his students used to love using Google Expeditions, where they had to do a writing activities describing places. Carol Rainbow in the chat then asked the question, what do they actually do whilst exploring? And he said that after the tour, every group describes the place and finally present their tour orally to the rest of the class. You then said, well, this depends on the students' levels, and you gave the example of, say, a 6-year-old or a class of 6-year-olds visiting, say, a 360-degree view of some elephants, and then describing that afterwards. Could you tell us a little bit more about your experience with very young learners and using VR headsets?
Indeed, it all depends on the students' level of English. So, for instance, what was mentioned in the chat, it's very successful when you have students intermediate level onwards to virtually visit different locations and then describe to each other, or maybe while describing using one key topic they are learning. For instance, I had an advanced group, and then like one student visited the pyramids in Cairo and the other visited the location in outer space, and they had to share how different that experience was using the passive reporting of verbs, which was the target language for that precise lesson. But then when you consider the 6-year-old students, like mentioned, they've got word level vocabulary. So they can say, I can see an elephant, or look, an elephant. And of course, they show the surprise, because if you get the video from like this forest in Africa, and suddenly there's a giraffe or elephants or lions, so there's this element of surprise as well as they turn. And of course, it's important to attach the production to the level of students and their age range.
One of the chatters, Sean, argued that just as we're using video on a phone, he says that he argued that the immersive element doesn't actually add much to the language activity. Do you agree, or do you slightly disagree with that?
I think we've got points here. Of course, simply stating it's just another video experience that you've got, maybe the sense of being to the place, but it all depends on how this is directed as an activity. So this is a point I agree with him, of course. I had last year a group of students visit the hurricane, one hurricane that had happened in the USA. And a person who was, while the hurricane was happening, was able to have some footage of everything going on. So the students could experience the sensation, because the lesson was about natural disasters. And then we don't have this kind of natural disaster in Brazil. Thanks God, we have others, but not that in particular. So after experiencing this somehow, using the Google Cardboard, they could enhance their perception. And then while talking to each other about what they had seen, it somehow interfered in a positive way. It changed their perception. But that's it. It all depends on the usage that you give to it. For instance, when I had students visiting Turkey or Egypt, like how often do people in Brazil get to visit those places? That's not common. And then I think there's certainly an effect, and it's important.
And the teachers that participated on this all reported, this awakening of like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I did this, and I didn't realize that what my students were doing while I had my back to them and I was writing on the wall. So it was a very, very interesting process for them, and it did promote a lot of self-reflection. And it was also very useful for the CELTA trainers to watch this with them using their own head-mounted display and then give them feedback and draw their attention to particular aspects of the class. So that was just a basic experiment. Later I moved on from this a little bit, and I was teaching a tech course in Oxford, and I started wanting to add extra information to my spherical videos. So that as a trainer, for example, as the student was looking at their own teaching, I could put hotspots and point out information and highlight certain things that I would like them to pay attention to. So I started experimenting with this idea of embedding multimedia hotspots into 360-degree images, but also into live 360-degree video. So this was a tech course that I taught in Oxford. I think it was last summer, and there are different teachers doing different things. And then what I did as a kind of archive of some of the things they were doing was create these virtual reality hotspots that when they went back home, they could rewatch the video and they could look at different pieces of information about what they were doing and how they were doing it. So this again ties into the title of my talk, which was using virtual reality, but also transmedia spherical video.